those kinds of activities are far and away the best way to innovate.
Welcome back to Season 3 of Civvies. I'm your host, Andy Gill.
Not a lot of veterans know what a software factory is.
In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with two of MetroStar's distinguished technical fellows, as well as the current CTO at BESPIN.
We have the only one that can deliver straight to Apple, Google Play.
We'll dive into how every uniform member can play a pivotal role in software modernization.
Seeing soldiers be able to make better impact for other soldiers was the highlight of my time at the software factory.
We'll also share inspiring stories of veterans transitioning into the tech industry with self-taught software skills.
Just make a thing. You might not be able in your current environment to solve the problem, but you can certainly envision how you might solve that problem in general.
And we'll explore the latest innovations, highlighting how industry partners like MetroStar are collaborating with DoD software factories to drive progress.
Starting from zero isn't always the best step.
Stay tuned for an insightful and engaging discussion that bridges the gap between military service and cutting-edge technology.
So welcome to Civvies. Everyone, we've got an exciting episode today. With us, we have Matt Nelson, who is the current CTO at BESPIN. We've got Hannah Hunt and Austin Herrling, who are technical fellows here at MetroStar. So to kick us off, we'll start with Matt, but if y'all could just go around and just kind of share a little bit of background about who you are, what your role is, and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll start here. So yeah, my name is Matt Nelson. As Andy mentioned, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at a software factory in the Air Force called BESPIN. I've been in and around the software world for the last 18 years, did 15 years active duty, got out, helped a company grow from a very small footprint to a large footprint. That company was Rise 8. But during that time, I was also a reservist for BESPIN. So the mission pulled me back in. So I've been a government civilian now for a little over 2 years.
Awesome. Hannah?
Hi, yeah, I'm Hannah Hunt. I'm a distinguished technical fellow with MetroStar in our defense business unit, supporting our current defense customers, primarily the Marine Corps and the DoD Chief Digital and AI Office. Former software factory, Air Force and Army civilian with Kessel Run, and then helping to stand up the Army software factory out of Army Futures Command.
Awesome. Austin?
Hey, my name is Austin Herrling. I'm also a technical fellow at MetroStar, also in the Defense Business Unit, also formerly of the Army Software Factory, where I was a Chief Data Officer for a couple of years. Was about 8 years in the Army, got out, and have been doing data-related things, MetroStar-related defense things. Include some delivery stuff, product management, some AI-related CDAO work, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And so obviously you all are experts with understanding what a software factory is. Our audience are primarily civilians that have transferred out of the military or other veterans or veteran interested parties. Not a lot of veterans know what a software factory is. They might have a lot of ideas in their brain about what a software factory is for the DoD. But could you all just give a brief overview of what the mission of a software factory is, and then Matt, if you can go into a little bit more detail about BESPIN in particular.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would define a software factory as an organization that's focused on the continuous delivery of software into production. That's a heavy statement that you have to unpack, and there's a lot of bottlenecks that you need to basically disrupt or break apart if you're really going to be an effective software factory, because it's all about getting software out the door and approved for use inside the hands of the warfighter. So that's what we do here at BESPIN. So BESPIN is the DoD's premier mobile software factory. So we have the only continuous authority to operate. Now they're changing that vernacular to more of a CI/CD pipeline that can grant certificates to field into different production environments. We have that ability with inside BESPIN. We have the only one that can deliver straight to Apple, Google Play, any of the MDMs, which is a mobile device manager. Think of that as an enclave to manage government phones. And also we can deploy web apps to production as well. So that's our pipeline. Our organization consists of about a little over 100 government personnel, primarily being the majority of them being military. We have around 70 military personnel inside BESPIN. We have the largest contingency of 1 Delta 7 computer programmers, which is an enlisted career field inside the Air Force, a little over a dozen civilians that provide the continuity, and then a couple acquisition officers, cyber security officers, and things like that. So that's the demographics, but I'll let other people kind of chime in of what a software factory is for them.
Yeah, because obviously I know, Hannah, you've got a broad purview into multiple DoD software factories. So I guess from you and Austin's perspective, like with the Army software factory and others, so can you give like maybe a little history lesson on where this idea came from? Because I know back in, I joined the Air Force before 9/11, so I remember DOS-based, maintenance logs and very antiquated systems that some of them are actually still around. But can you give like a history of where this software factory idea was birthed from and kind of the evolution of it to today?
Yeah, and honestly, part of that was a lot of Matt's doing back in 2017, 2018. So the kind of the story of the first software factory, which software factory is Kessel Run in the Air Force, modernizing their operations center weapons system. It came out of a project done by the Defense Innovation Unit, experimental. You can read this in the book that they just published maybe about a year ago about DIU and the history of DIU. And it was to digitize the tanker planning process in Qatar, in the 609th Air Operations Center. The way that they were planning tankers and allocating tankers for refueling missions was on this kind of puck board that was a whiteboard that you moved little pucks around. And the story goes that Eric Schmidt and the Defense Innovation Board came and visited the 609th AOC, and I was like, this could be software. And so a small team at DIU of active duty folks primarily and industry partners built the first tanker planner tool known as Jigsaw. After that, after the kind of destruction of the Air Operations Center weapon system program that got canceled by Senator John McCain at the time, Kessel Run became the AOC Pathfinder program that stood up to build software with organic government and military capability versus outsourcing things to contractors, system integrators to build a thing. It was more about bringing that talent internal. Matt was one of the kind of first 25 people in the program, and I joined when it was 100-ish people, and it's now a almost 2,000 person organization. What's different about the software factories in the Air Force and the software factory in the Army is that the Army does not sit within acquisition programs. So the Army software factory is really focused actually more on a training and upskilling mission to train soldiers on how to build and deliver software, and then actually build capabilities that are useful for them. But it's not like they're tied to a program of record where they have to build a certain thing to meet some form of big R requirement. So there are different flavors of software factories in the DoD.
Gotcha. And in Austin, if my memory serves me correctly, that's kind of your pathway into this world. Was you were a uniform member and you entered into the Army software factory. Can you talk to that a little bit about what your experience was coming into a software factory in a uniform capacity?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like Hannah said, because we were not tied to capital R requirements, our mission was sort of explicitly to prototype a future force design. So the entirety of the software factory was crafted around this idea of, okay, we know that it's a good idea to have software factories. We know that software factories are effective for modernization. They're effective for delivering software. It's sort of this universally well understood concept. Our idea was, let's do that. Let's deliver software. Let's train folks, but let's do it in anticipation of these teams of developers, and product managers, and product designers eventually going out and sort of re-embedding themselves back into the Army in a bunch of different spaces. And that's actually been happening since Hannah and I were there. So it was this sort of combination of, okay, we're going to learn this really cool, cutting edge thing. And that was really exciting. But also we know that we're eventually going to go back to the Army and do this stuff for, the folks that we were just serving with, right? It's not, we're not going off to do a thing and then we're just going to go whatever, float around in the clouds. Our intent was, okay, we're learning this because it is like a skill, right? It is just as much, a way to execute the mission of the United States Army as as we were doing before. So that was really cool. Like it gave us a real sense of camaraderie. It was very much like, hey, like, we were pretty close to, at the time, Fort Hood, and we drove up there every week, and we had people, going out into the ranges and going out to do trainings and like seeing like what soldiers were doing, and then we'd build software for them. So it was like this, okay, we've got these folks from all across the Army, all across different MOSs and ranks, and we brought all that together and handled problems that soldiers submitted to us through our online portal, and that was really cool. So it was simultaneously a very new sort of like, we're going to experiment, wear civilian clothes and like be rankless and have this kind of stuff, but also at the same time we had senior leaders coming in all the time, and we'd put on our uniforms and say like, hey sir, hey ma'am, like this is what we're doing. Like we're doing this Army concept. We're delivering value to the Army, and we're doing it in a way that, consistent with industry practices, but really isn't all that different, right? Like the idea of small teams collaborating to solve problems together is very much an Army thing at its core. So I had a great time. I really liked it. It was a really, really cool job, not just because of the cool like data centered flavored work that we were doing, but also just because it was like real people. Like we affected real users, and at the end of the day, that was really rewarding, and it really helped motivate everybody and keep everybody moving in the same direction.
That's awesome.
I had a great time. It was a blast.
Yeah. And Matt, is it similar with BESPIN, and that, as far as the uniform members portion of the contingent staff, they're like, are they cycling in and cycling out from other uniform positions within the Air Force?
Yeah, we get the vast majority of our airmen are straight out of tech school. So
Okay.
they're relatively junior developers. So I'd say over 50% of them are, fresh from tech school at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. They come to us, and we do have a pseudo like unwritten mission, or I guess it is written, because we want to try to, build the next generation of digital talent within the Air Force. So we take them through a very disciplined process around, hey, you're going to do an MQT, which is a mission qualification training. Then you're going to do an IQT, which is initial qualification training. And then you're going to get put onto a dev team, and we're going to build structure around, supporting you. We'll have tech leads on each of the different software languages. So if you get stuck, you can submit a ticket to those tech leads to have them pair with you to get over some sort of ticket you've been assigned you just can't quite figure out. Now with the advent of AI coding assist tooling and things like that, we can really equip these junior engineers to start building amazing software pretty quickly. And that's what I think the beauty of the software factory moniker is as it matures, because I do think we're kind of in like a reset point, with inside software factories of, hey, how do we think about this of equipping the organic talent that we know we need to develop with best of breed COTS tools so they can go faster than, just waiting for the acquisition cycles. So that's what gets me excited, is like figuring out that, like, what's that, reshift going to look like, and how we can best, structure a force around that problem statement of being able to have a team, like a small team solving problems that you can just go to and, trust that they're going to solve it for X, Y, and Z user base. So that's what we do at BESPIN, primarily inside of the logistics portfolios. We do support tactical C2 as well. Because if you think about it, the folks that are using mobile applications are the ones that aren't behind a computer for the most part. And those are the, the operators that are outside the wire, or the maintainers that are on the flight line. All of those pieces, they really have that need for mobile capabilities. So yeah, it's definitely a reshift point of like, what's this next generation of digital talent going to do, and how are they going to do it, and how are we going to structure it?
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the shift portion and like what the future of, what you all are going to be working on. But before we get there, Austin, you alluded to a little bit of this. Like, my question is like, where do you all's requirements come from? Like, I know you're not just like in some, basement building, random Air Force applications. So like when it comes to like what these airmen and these soldiers are working on from a development standpoint, can you kind of outline where the requirements come from, how they get into the hands of the folks with fingers on keyboards, and then maybe allude to maybe some stuff that's going on currently, if you have the liberty to talk about it. Like what type of warfighter capabilities are we talking about today that are being worked on?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about it. So there's a few interesting things to say here. So the first is that we were, so like I said, prototyping and future force design was the mission of Software Factory. We were also trying to get a good understanding of how do we source good problems? Like, what does it mean to do good problem curation and problem development? Because that is itself a skill, right? So that's something that we teach to our product managers or product designers is how to go talk to a user and figure out what problems they're actually having, right? Figure out what the core issue is. So we sort of had this front door, external facing website where people could submit problems, and we got all kinds of submissions.
Like the old Air Force idea program.
Yeah,
just submit your idea and maybe it'll get picked up.
Right. Yeah. It's a suggestion box, right? As our notoriety grew, we got more and more submissions, which was good. It did a couple things. It first gave us obviously the ideas of projects to work on. Also gave us a good sense of what kinds of issues people were willing to talk about or thought that software might solve. So that sort of became its own like interesting and unique data set down the line. So generally what we do is we get these problems in, we take a first pass, Hannah and I in the product office, we take a look and say, all right, like, what is this? Is this good? And the question of is it good depends on a couple things. Is it suitable for the folks that we're training? Is it solvable with the kind of technology that we're able to provide? Do we have access to data? Do we have access to licenses? Do we have access to the right kind of people that we need to talk to do some like deep problem investigation? And, does it have impact, right? There's all kinds of suggestions that were like, I want a widget that will help me do my job. And it's like, great, I can imagine absolutely like what software would do and how it would improve what you're working on. But is it your problem or is it 100,000 people's problem? And the projects with the bigger reach are, just as important as the smaller ones, but they do let us go affect more people and, test out our technologies in more environments and interact with, more leaders and soldiers and, ecosystems and data sets. And so we'd always sort of keep an eye on like how much is this going to affect the Army? Because that's, it's motivating for the teams. It's cool to solve problems. It really can help showcase how effective the Software Factory would be at solving, real problems, right? Like the bigger, sort of the elephant that you tackle or that you train, the more effective you are at showing how you might do that in the future. So that was, sort of where we went with our first set of problems for our first cohort. And then as we had more people come in, as we sort of matured as an organization, we shifted our focus a little bit to, try out different kinds of technologies. We at first we were focused like progressive web apps, and we said like, all right, let's take a look at maybe some problems like recruiting or retention problems that the Army's facing. Maybe we'll take a look at products that exist in different impact levels or different classification levels, problems that might involve particular kinds of hardware or software that the Army is using. So we branched out a little bit there. We were in a really interesting place, not being tied to requirements. That was a question that we got asked all the time, right? Like, who decides what you work on? And it's like, well, we do, right? Like we're prototyping soldiers being on teams that do software development. We could very well have just solved toy academic problems that didn't actually affect anything, but that's not meaningful. That's not meaningful to the soldiers. It's not meaningful to all the stakeholders and, and people who threw their weight behind the Software Factory. So we were interested in solving real problems that matter. And, it was a way for us to give back. And I'll say too, sort of as it became more and more well known what the Software Factory did and what the kinds of caliber solution that we were delivering, we got more and more interest from senior leaders that were like, okay, like I have a thing that I want to be solved, or like I have a product that I would like delivered that does a particular thing. And, though there was maybe some tension sometimes with the intake funnel that we had, that model of senior leaders saying, I want that, is exactly what we were trying to do. Like it is good for a senior leader to say, I want a development team, because that is itself a proof of a future force design because it is a senior leader that's asking for it. And that's what is happening now. So to the extent to which I'm actually aware of the problems that are getting solved, it is teams that are out these forts, with corps and division and brigade working on problems that are directly sourced from those units. And the lessons that we taught about how to do good product development, how to do good problem identification, and help senior leaders like triage their list of concerns to say, hey, this is something we can achieve, or we can achieve quickly, or we can achieve with software is a really important part of that stage. So I'll turn it over to Hannah there too to see if I missed anything major. But that's sort of the story of our problem curation.
Yeah, I would say yeah. So I was the chief of product, so I kind of oversaw this life cycle, not just the intake and evaluation of the software, but also how effective the soldiers were being in building the software. So we would get these really interesting problem sets that were not being solved by enterprise software, things that weren't important enough to be included in enterprise software or too niche for whatever use case. A really good example is we were working with the 11th Airborne out in Alaska. There's no way currently in the Army to measure the thickness of ice to be able to do airborne operations on ice.
Kind of important for the
Yeah, and so they borrowed some formula from the Norwegians in some of their exercises to be able to measure ice thickness. And that's a very niche problem, right? You're not dealing with that a lot. Why would a PEO build an enterprise software for that?
But it's important to those people that were doing it on a daily basis. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So our team went out and did discovery, met with the user base, and built a working piece of software that is valuable to them to be able to measure ice thickness. There's other examples of systems that have a smaller user base but have a massive impact, especially when it comes to ammo safety and being able to have different types of ammo together in the same type of ammo supply point without the risk of some adverse action happening and all of it blow up. And so that's a small user-based problem of ordnance warrant officers that need to solve that problem, but not big enterprise armies going to look to solve that. So we looked at that from an impact perspective. And then also we had a team, a growth board, which is a model that's used in venture capital that Matt introduced me to when I was at Kelso, about how to make investment and divestment decisions across your portfolio of products. And so again, us having the luxury of not necessarily being a big R requirement deliverer is that we could make decisions on whether we continue to labor investments in building the software. Is this good enough? Does this solve the problem? Can it go into maintenance mode and we just maintain it from a security and patching perspective? Or do we have more to build? Or are we looking at a different slice of it that we may have missed previously? So we could have these conversations and be able to actually have a really robust portfolio management strategy on the different types of problems that we would continue to work on, or, kind of sustain or even transition to different organizations that wanted to continue development. So it was really kind of this holistic process, not just of building unique software that couldn't be solved from the enterprise, but also actually being able to say, hey, I'm not going to invest in this anymore, and having those real types of conversations on what's important to the Army.
And so, Matt, is that similar because you're the one that's doing it today at BESPIN, is that still true today where you have that authoritative power to kind of drive the direction of, are we going to continue down this path? Or are we going to shift gears? Is that still the case?
It's somewhat still the case. We now, as we grow and mature, we have stakeholders that, are also involved in that decision because, when we originally started BESPIN and I was a reservist, pretty much, after BESPIN got stood up, and it was very much like, hey, you can source ideas, try to find what is the best application to build for just getting the organization's processes figured out, the tooling figured out, making sure that the people have the right skill set and all of that. But as we matured and now, we started back in 2019 in BESPIN and now it's 2025, what we've evolved into, and it's just slowly taken its course, is hey, we now have the tools. We're building in a CI/CD pipeline. We have parity with our production environments. We kind of have cracked the nut when it comes to modern DevSecOps development, and our people are being tracked and monitored and supported. The next thing that we wanted to do was pick those stakeholders that we wanted to really just establish a solid relationship with and solidify that with a capability needs statement to kind of go back into, the software acquisition pathway, the more corporate structure of the DoD's program management processes. So we can have at least some left and right guardrails around, hey, these are the things that we know that we eventually are wanting to build, and compounding these over time, we're going to get really focused and really good at solving these things for, in our case, like for tactical command and control. And what are those different capabilities that you could deploy from a mobile perspective, from an app's components for the, being able to use your mobile device, like identity access and those types of things. And that's where we're starting this process now. So it it does two things for us. One, I think it really helps us mature those processes, because we don't want to be making those decisions in a vacuum when it comes to, hey, is this, like, from a growth forward perspective, is this worth going on? Because people are just naturally emotionally connected to their projects. So having that voice of a stakeholder and the voice of the actual end user saying, hey, no, we need this instead of that, because at the end of the day, it's all around making sure that you have your, like, you know, you're continuing to grow and learn when it comes to your processes that you're trying to implement. And that's where we're at right now in investment.
Gotcha. And so what is the direction? I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit about the shift and things. What are the things, with what you have liberty to talk about? Like, what are the things that are today being worked on as far as warfighter capabilities? Because we think about warfighter capabilities and just that name warfighter, just, you go to command and control stuff, but there's also, like, just the speed of doing things like automation and AI and how that's being, brought into this, logistics. And just to talk about logistics alone for hours. What are those things and those areas of impact that software factories are having today?
Yeah, and I think, it depends on which software factory you're talking to, because if you look
Sure.
at Castle Run and
We'll talk to BESPIN for now.
yeah. So if you look at Castle Run, they're more on the operational command and control side, and they might not even call themselves a software factory anymore. But from a BESPIN perspective, what we just established these portfolios, and our portfolios are really those intentional, processes that we're going to go from training a portfolio leader inside of BESPIN that's going to, make sure that the applications that are underneath inside of their portfolio have intentional, design for them to interoperate with each other. So if you look at it from, one of the things that we're doing is, hey, we want to be able to have, a CUI level chat application. That CUI level chat application should be able to push that information or push data from that chat application into, TAC, which is, tactical assault kit. So you can have that cross flow of information, should be able to push it, through a high speed guard or cross domain solution, however you're going to try to implement from those low to high transfers. All of those pieces working together is really what we're trying to get at from a portfolio perspective. Same with logistics is our other, main portfolio of, hey, if we have a logistics app that's looking at technical orders for, like, on mobile devices or on tablets, that same app should be able to then, spin up a work order application for you so you can input that information, and it all works together from a portfolio perspective. And, that's something that, as organic software developers, we need to, from the shift perspective, we need to be very smart and make really good build buy decisions around how are we going to leverage tools that industry has already built, and from a COTS perspective, leverage those to the maximum extent possible. So when we come in and we have a portfolio, one of our portfolio capabilities might be a COTS tool. And then we're augmenting that COTS tool with a really responsive application that warfighters can come in and say, hey, can you build this new feature? And we can, because of the power of continuous delivery, we could do it in like 2 weeks, depending on the complexity of the request. Versus if you have a COTS tool, you're, at the mercy of the vendor, and the vendor might, have other different things in their roadmap, and you're just waiting. So that's the kind of balance between COTS and this organic development that you have to kind of figure out. And I think the best way to do it is, you have to have that portfolio leadership that can look at it at a higher level and say, this is how my system interacts with each other. Here's how we're going to like incorporate this to meet a higher level objective versus just a single application goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Hannah, Austin, anything in addition to that when we're talking like just the shift in actual deliverable capabilities that we're seeing happen, unfold as we speak?
It's really amazing. And to Matt's point, like seeing soldiers be able to make more and better impact for other soldiers was the highlight of my time at the software factory. The level of excitement of them getting to go into the field and meet with their stakeholders and their end users and getting feedback and making changes on the fly because of that continuous delivery model, to operate in real world missions and be able to deliver software for NATO like exercises and things like that is super cool. But the portfolio management piece that Matt talks about is so important, not just for software factories, but for acquisition programs and PEOs writ large. We tend to take these kind of one-off, like this program does this thing and this program does this thing, instead of it being something that's more like intertwined and be able to make decisions on, hey, this program isn't delivering well, and I can add some slight functionality to this other program to meet the same need. So I'm going to divest from that program and invest in this other one. But there's a lot of, frankly, risk aversion to doing that because everybody's got their kind of their own pot of money that they want to keep and they want to protect. But that is, if you look at some of the legislation coming out and the pushes within Congress to really build that portfolio management strategy, all the things that we've done at these lower levels with these honestly small teams can be something that can scale to across these program executive offices if they just, I guess, took the risk to be able to do it, because we've been able to do it with, software factories, but Army software factories budget was pennies on the dollar compared to these bigger programs, but we were still able to make those decisions.
So the two interesting things with that. First, it like reflected in the problem submissions we got. I won't name and shame, but there was a particular Army application that, despite having tens of millions of dollars of funding behind it, still required a soldier to hand carry weather data between machines in order to operate. And we got one of our proposals, or like one of the problems that got submitted was, hey, can we fix this? And the answer, of course, is yeah, like that would be trivial to fix, right? It's, it's moving a small amount of data, once a day or something like that. But it was difficult for us to get into the space because of pushback from the PEOs and the folks that own the system, and the fact that the requirements were written so specifically. And indeed, the like specificity of things and sort of inability to be flexible is what actually led a lot of the folks that we ended up getting at the software factory to be valid candidates for the software factory. And what I mean by that is almost like to a person at the software factory, the people that we got had done something software related while they were in their units. So I was exactly the same. I use like Microsoft Access and Outlook and SharePoint to like set up automations for tracking, how many of our people were aerosol qualified. And we had, people that developed apps for maintenance, and we had people that developed, apps for like tracking anything that, that they possibly could. And some people deployed web apps and deployed their own servers. And like we had people that were working on those edges, right? That were trying to solve the problems that were meaningful to them and to their units. So we institutionalized that, which was great because it was the thing that they were already motivated to do. But it does show that the problems that soldiers have, like needs must, like people will adapt to sort of the constraints that exist, but there are rough edges, right? Like these giant programs and these giant pieces of software, no matter how well intentioned, run into edge cases. And the edge cases and these like small team oriented, sort of like rapid deployment enabled, CI/CD friendly problems are exactly the kinds of problems that we'll continue to see, just by virtue of that's how software works, right? One of our mottos, and Hannah's motto in particular, was that software is never done. There's always a new problem to solve. There's always something that'll emerge, and a framework that allows you to address those problems, I think, will continue to be a place where it is important and impactful to have organizations like software factories.
It's awesome. And obviously we love our PEOs, and you all are saying language of like, we're going in the right direction. Things are getting more aligned. What is, I guess, from y'all's perspective, like I don't want to say biggest blocker, but like understanding the challenges of what the software factory capabilities are, what industry can provide and what the government needs, what DoD needs, like what is the commonality of we really need to, to hinge on this in order to get, less into the micro problem solving and more of the macro problem solving that Hannah was talking about earlier. Like what is that like general understanding that all parties need to be operating from, if that question makes sense?
I have a strong opinion on this one. Okay, so
we'll start with you then.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So I was chief data officer. For me, the number one problem was always data access. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of systems that make data. We had a really hard time in general getting access to data sources that we could do things with. So I think that there's a couple reasons for this. I think the first is that sort of traditional concept of using data is I'm going to make a dashboard, or I'm going to make a report, or I'm going to present in a model, or some AI ML use case. I'm going to present this data in some particular way. That's good. That's not comprehensive in software. We need to interact with data. We need to create data in many cases. One of the things that we worked on, for example, was preventative maintenance, or checks and services, PMCS, in the Army. And this is like, I go out on a Monday and I check to see if the truck still works and if it has any parts that are broken, all on paper, right? So we needed, we based on the problem submissions that came in, based on opinions that some of our folks had. When I just mentioned that we had people that built maintenance applications, that was one of the warrant officers that was on that team. We had this problem, and we said, okay, great. There is a database that handles equipment and handles these PMCS orders. It handles the steps you need to repair and the parts replacement and stuff. We didn't have access to it directly. We could read it, but we couldn't write to it, and we couldn't use the data in a way that you would expect, another sort of industrial or commercial application where all the pieces really fit together. I think Spotify is a good sort of canonical example, right? If your playlist team doesn't have access to the songs directly and can't, write names of playlists to the database, then you're sort of limited in utility. So data access was always a big problem. Even in cases where we had direct access, we were given access, we had the gold stamp, the rubber seal of approval. It still took us, in some cases, like 6 months to get access to data sets that we were promised access to, because it was wrapped up in like strict requirements, or because there wasn't like money allocated to development of like modern interfaces, API sharing services, and things like that. So all that to say, data access is a big problem, but it is a problem that's known, and it's a problem that industry faces, and there are plenty of solutions that industry has, for how to address this. That to me was always the biggest one. Security is another one too, but I'll stick with data as my number one.
Nice. Matt, Hannah, anything on that?
Yeah, I know, like, with Austin saying data, like that's the Family Feud number one answer, right? But the other thing that I see as we move forward as growing our capabilities is just the ability to use AI inside of the software development process, and also being able to use AI on the back end when it comes to data fusion, data analysis, and these future models. The Microsoft CEO back in December said, like, business applications and SaaS is going to be dead in the next 5 years, and agents are going to replace that, because you'll have the ability, it'll be so ubiquitous and so user friendly to create a capability to give you the information that you're looking for. And essentially that's what an application primarily does. So right now we've cracked the nut on CI/CD and cybersecurity assessments of source code that we've built and then left it in house. And if you have some dependencies, you do this, SPOM analysis, and you really have figured that out as well. But then getting into, all right, like, now, how are we going to do this if we have multiple agents helping us build these applications? Where do these agents need to live? How can we get access to them? What changes in our cybersecurity assessment process do we need to make? What changes in our training capabilities do we need to make? Because you don't want to just build something that's really flashy, but then has a lot of tech debt and debt in the back end on like no, automated testing or anything like that. So that's where I have been spending a lot of my time in critical thinking is like, hey, if we're going to like recreate what, paired programming was when it was, two humans doing paired programming and supported by a CI/CD pipeline, what is the future of that when it comes to agents helping us, making sure we still learn and still understand what these agents are spitting out from a code development process so you can still troubleshoot, but still leverage it so you can, 5x your speed of delivery type of thing. So we're still a long way there from trusting those tools, hosting those tools at like easy access, and then, making sure that it's part of like the AO's comfort level of accepting risk inside of that capability. And, also on the back end too, because then if you have those tools, in theory, you could take two disparate data sources and fuse them together on the back end. If you had access to that data, maybe you won't be able to, write to those disparate data sources, the databases like Austin was getting at, but at least you can, give people information to do their job in a more effective way. And I think that's where, if we don't start having those critical conversations now, I think in 5 years we'll be, behind the power curve, kind of like what we were, a generation ago when it came to cloud and DevSecOps and all of that adoption.
I know there's companies like MetroStar that are working on a lot of that stuff. I know Hannah probably had a lot to say about, what you just said, but I want to leave room for Hannah to answer that original question. And then I would like to kind of unpack a little bit of that. Like, I mean, AI is a buzzword these days, but AI is here to stay. AI is like the capabilities at the user level all the way through, large scale enterprise is just amazing. So I do want to kind of get on that and see where these software factories are aligning themselves in that regard. But original question, Hannah, like getting on the same page for a path to move forward for faster modernization.
Yeah, I think Matt's point around the cybersecurity piece is probably frankly the bottleneck in pretty much all delivery. You could have a great CI/CD pipeline and a great development process, but if you don't have shared understanding with your authorizing official and the ISMs and the ISOs on what is considered appropriate risk or not, then you're still going to have a very long lead time to get things into production and in the hands of users. The point of platforms is to be able to quickly iterate with user bases. The developer teams need that ability to rapidly iterate to make changes that meet mission needs. And by having a very slow cybersecurity apparatus, you really risk that. The big challenge from my perspective is not the technology problems. It's all like workforce development, training, talent management, personality-driven risk decision-making, vibes-based decision-making, which is what I like to call it. Just like, I don't really trust that, so I'm not going to improve your ATO. Those types of things, it is a cultural problem. Technologies and tools are not going to solve it. It's getting shared understanding and alignment on a specific process or security guardrails or workflow that requires significant buy-in from many different organizations. Just to whitelist an application in the DoD coming from a service requires, especially in the Army, requires 4 organizations to approve that whitelisting to be able to make that application available on the commercial internet. That is a massive amount of toil, manual ticket input, scan reviews that don't matter, and then it becomes this massive, like I said, bottleneck. So those are the problems that people have, tried to solve with ATOs in a day, software factory, platform capabilities. It all sounds really good. The technology sounds really neat, but at the end of the day, it's a people thing. And that's not going to change until there's an incentive structure within the department that incentivizes that risk taking to be appropriate. A great example is we're working through a SaaS ATO right now with one of our customers. A SaaS ATO, a SaaS product that's been accredited 3 or 4 dozen times across the DoD. But it's brand new, again, even though the same service has it accredited in different parts. So it becomes this thing of we've already agreed that this is inherent, this is secure. The way that we have it is secure. But because this person's never seen it before. There's a poor risk appetite. And so that's like my little high horse, but it is like, I feel like we always focus on like the tools and the technologies and less about the people and the talent management aspects that make it really critical to actually do the work.
The bottlenecks are fears and anxieties and really lack of understanding of what the capabilities are or how safe the capabilities can be if handled and built correctly. Obviously, with software factories, industry partnership is super important. Can you all briefly explain kind of where is that intersection of industry partners like MetroStar and Kessel Run and the Army Software Factory? Like, where do those two worlds collide?
In my opinion, those two worlds collide is you have this one world where it's organic software development, and you have a team of folks that either you're training or are already highly skilled in software development and product management and software design. And then you have industry partners that either can help, bring your team up to the next level or provide tooling to make you go even faster. And there's a whole breadth of tools that you could use. And so where they collide, in my opinion, is finding those round pegs in a round hole that says, hey, my team is really great, but what we lack is a strong understanding of, let's just say, I don't know, like data streaming technologies or something like that. So we need to either find a commercial off-the-shelf technology that's going to do that event stream or whatever kind of Kafka-based data thing that you're trying to do. And you don't even need to know that. You just need to find, again, take it back to your problem set. It's like, I want to be able to like get near real-time alerts of when something changes state inside of my like operational landscape. And then I need to be able to visualize and push that up to leaders and then you say, okay, that's my problem statement. I can either build it myself or I can go out and find it. So in my opinion, you collide when you're really doing your market research, really doing your homework of like, hey, this is a proven technology or this is a proven team that solved this before. It would make more sense to just rent that technology or contract with this vendor to then be able to bring it in versus always trying to do it yourself. If you always trying to do it yourself, you're going to slow down over time because it's just inevitable that like starting from zero isn't always the best step. And then finding those ways where you can start at 10 is where I think they collide, in my opinion.
Yeah, not reinventing the wheel. If you've got industry partners that have capabilities and digital services that help you do what the problem is that you have, then, might as well just tap on that shoulder and have that partnership.
Yeah.
So
it is I will say it is a double-edged sword though, because of end users are always hesitant on the license bill on the back end. And if they're like, well, is this a GOTS thing that I don't have to pay for? And if you're not a program of record and you're like, yeah, you're going to have to like send us some money if you want to use this tool. That's always a double-edged sword. So figuring out that balance of the licensing on the back end is tough. But I think like if it's a capability that's truly solving problems in a very impactful way, the licensing is less of a conversation versus, upfront type of thing of like, trust me, just buy this thing and it'll work. That's always the hardest part.
Yeah, and obviously Hannah and Austin on the other side of that fence, being in industry, MetroStar, obviously we're constantly working on our capabilities and digital services. How are you all handling that problem that Matt just mentioned?
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed at the software factory is we get a lot of sales calls that were from like new technologies or like a brand new idea, somebody that like wasn't already invested and entrenched with the government. We didn't have the procurement authority in a lot of instances to even action on those kinds of things. But when people came to us and said, hey, we have an existing contract vehicle, we're already embedded, we're doing work on this project, can we collaborate? The answer was always like, yeah, like what can we do? Like, let's see what we can do. So, for MetroStar, a way to sort of bypass what Matt described is that, the sticker shock or just like the hesitancy to, go down a brand new route is to say, all right, like we're working with you already in this capacity. We've thought of ways that we can help you given stuff that the government already has or licenses that already exist or tools that are already ATO'd, especially, things that are already in your ecosystem that we can give to you. And we think that it can, move both of us forward. And like really honest sort of portrayals of like, this is like all the cards on the table. This is why we think it would be useful to partner was a big hit for us at the Software Factory. And similarly, it has been a big hit from what I've seen at MetroStar, because people like to come up with cool ideas and they like to think of innovative solutions and they like to move the needle forward. Like that is itself satisfying. And to do that while bypassing any ATO questions and to use licenses that are already budgeted for, that are already acquired, use platforms that already aggregate and collect data, use tools that already integrate like AI solutions and, things like Copilot that, the Army that already has, on its books and can already integrate to accelerate its workflows. Stuff like that is really interesting. It, lowers the barrier to entry. It resonates with folks that are already using the tools. And, sort of like what I said before about the small problems on the edges, those are the effective places to go solve stuff because you can move quickly, because you're not saying, I want to totally revamp an entire piece of enterprise software. It's instead like, hey, this enterprise software gives us a capability to do this particular thing. Let's work with you, find out what your problems are, and let's solve them directly. And that's always a really effective way to get people on board.
Yeah. Hannah, anything else on that topic?
Yeah, I think for me, I see a lot of times companies in this industry, in the GovCon industry, tend to go to the tool or the technology solution instead of understanding what the business needs are and the mission needs are. I often see like this software is going to solve all your problems and here's why. And it's like, well, you never talked to me, so how would you know it's going to solve my problems? Like, it's about identifying those pain points and then making recommendations from there, which is hard. It's a chicken and the egg thing, because when you're doing proposals and you're submitting ideas, you're ultimately recommending a solution to a problem that like you're not on contract yet to know if it's like the right solution. So there's that understanding from that I've learned being on the industry side, having been somebody who did acquisitions on the government side, like that is a real challenge of making sure that you have enough intimacy of the organization that what you're recommending aligns with what their problems are, but not just like saying, I'm going to go solve everything by putting ChatGPT in your system to solve whatever problem it might be.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah, it's about that balance of finding the business problem and the user problem.
And if I can add to that too, like that was a reason why our problem curation work that we did at the Software Factory was so effective, because you can articulate a problem when you're experiencing it and you can infer a problem from the outside, but until you really dive into what is actually the issue here, it's very difficult to figure out what is the thing that needs to be solved, and then communicate effectively that this is the thing that actually we should be focusing on. And I do have one funny anecdote about problems, like solutions that aren't actually really solving the problem that they're going after. This is hardware, not software. But when I was at 101st, we had a group that came in, they were on contract already, so this was already procured, to build trucks that were these like mobile expanding vans for like mobile command centers. Because the goal was to say, hey, we've got all these tents and stuff. Tents are bulky, they take time to set up, and in future conflicts, that might not be a particularly safe thing to do. So they came in, they had these demos, and they said, hey, like, what kinds of features do you want in this? And the response that they got from the 101st is, well, can I sling it under a helicopter? And they were like, no, they're too heavy. And they said, I don't want them. Like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, this is a solution. It solves a problem, but it's not the solution that's right for me. And that it sort of cuts off at the knees any hope of like, I'm going to come in from the top with this great idea that I have. Whereas instead, if you like go and like understand the true need that people have, it's so much easier to collaborate, and it's so much easier to get a solution that actually works for everybody and like does the thing that you intended it to do in the first place.
Yeah. And I can imagine that, like, I mean, you can't just get that intimate knowledge just going to industry days. Like, those are great, but like, where is that like ability to for an industry partner to understand what the software factory world is doing, that understands, what the end user's problems are. Like how does all that continuity really come? It has to come through just connections and relationships and ongoing conversations. So when you're bringing your product, you're not just like, it's not just you talking about it for the first time. It's like, remember that conversation we had. Is that the precipice of like the problem solving on the industry side, Hannah?
I think so. It's about building trust. Even when in government, I did a lot of what I dubbed like internal consulting, because the software factory became this hub of like, oh, these people understand software, they can help me on my programs. And so came with a level of like support to be these programs that were struggling to hold their vendors accountable or to make the right decisions for their business need. And people just say, hey, like, yeah, this is hard. Like building that rapport, that's not what AI is not going to solve that, right? That trust building is a deeply human thing. Frankly, I wasn't trustworthy when companies would come and be like, hey, I got this great technology. I was like, cool for me, but like not something that I am interested in, doesn't solve my problems, to Austin's point. So it's about that balance of understanding where you're at, making the hard like discussion points. Like I see a lot of times vendors and even, just people in this industry that tend to just not push back on the government when they say or recommend something. Like that's why we're on contract, right? Like we're supposed to be the subject matter experts that can build whatever solution. Like frankly, when I was in government, I wanted people to push back on me if I said something that didn't make sense. And I see a lot of hesitancy within contractors to do that because they don't want to upset the government or whatever. But I actually preferred it when I was government. I wanted that honest feedback on where I need to improve, where the organization needs to improve. When I was a core or, managing multiple contracts, like that was what I cared about.
Awesome.
I have one more answer to your question, actually, Andy. So one thing that the 101st did while I was there that was incredibly effective is we had a partnership with Vanderbilt University. And they had done this several times, but one of the most impactful things I had ever seen was like a fully facilitated problem discovery and curation workshop about how to improve the aerosol planning process. So we had stakeholders from the university that were just like, hey, I'm an expert in mechanical engineering, or I'm an expert in process development. That's just the thing that I know what to do. We had folks from all across the different aspects of aerosol planning. So we had like pilots, and we had maintenance folks, and we had logisticians, and all of these people together sort of being vulnerable enough to say like, all right, like the way that we do it isn't perfect. Like we acknowledge that there is a solution that needs to be developed here. And then just 2 hours of brainstorming and putting the sticky notes on chalkboards and eventually coming up with like actionable, reasonable things to do. Those kinds of activities require everybody's participation, but are dramatically more effective at identifying root causes of problems, identifying good avenues for solutions that everybody, by the way, is bought into already because they help come up with it, right? Those kinds of activities are far and away, I have seen, the best way to innovate, to introduce new solutions, to find places, where you can go to solve problems. And it's hard. Like those are difficult to do. It's hard to get everybody in the same room. It's hard to get all these senior leaders invested. But if everybody can sort of take the time to do these sorts of workshops, and plan and decompose problems and map out user journeys and the like, you can get very effective solutions.
Yeah, it's almost like everybody's got their own egos, their own priorities, their own problems, their prioritization of problems. But if you get everybody in the room, like you said, drop your vulnerabilities, go down. Let's just sit around the kitchen table. Let's problem solve. Let's put our heads together. We're all experts, and let's get something done for national security and defense. So that's amazing. So our target audience of Civvies is generally transitioning military veterans that have already transitioned, or sometimes uniformed military services that are looking, okay, what's my next? I am a uniformed military person sitting in the Army, sitting in the Air Force. I'm a comm guy. I also have a home lab, and I tinker with Python scripting. Like, how do I get into the software factory world?
Well, so a lot of at least I'll let Matt speak to the Air Force pathway. It's not as robust, I guess I would say, and at least the Army. But so the Army just got or it's just initiating a career field for software development. The Air Force has had one since the 90s. So this is the first time.
Typical Air Force, we're thinking ahead. We're just decades ahead of everybody. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Army Software Factory has a cohort model. So every 6 months, you can apply to be part of the cohort. It's an application, rolling application. You PCS to Austin, and then you get, after your time learning and getting upskilled, then you go and complete your additional duty service obligation out of whatever operational unit it is. Right now, a lot of the soldiers are at like 1st Corps, U.S. Army Europe, 18th Airborne Corps. They're kind of Indo-PACOM. They're kind of all over the place. But that is the benefit of it is, right, you get this schooling, you build this cohort, and then you go and you solve problems with your operational units. So if you go to the Software Factory website, Army Software Factory website, you'll be able to see the link to apply. It's all aptitude-based. It's not skill-based. You learn the skills there. So if you've been interested in tinkering with Python or comms or, radios or whatever, and that's something that you're passionate about, then like go ahead and apply.
Awesome. Matt?
Yeah, I'd say like the DoD has come a long way in at least publicly presenting what they want their future workforce framework to be. So if you're interested, definitely just Google like DoD Cyber Workforce Framework, the DCWF. It's this interactive map, and cyber, I don't know why they called it cyber, but nested in cyber is software design, product management, software engineering, cybersecurity, of course, and dozens of other career fields. And then inside of that has a bunch of key attributes that they're looking for in that. And that's just to kind of see like, hey, am I a good fit for what the DoD is looking for? But, it's a slow process. It took me 6-9 months, and they had like expedited hiring authority to bring me into the civilian workforce. So there's opportunities just to like get close to the mission is what I would say. So even if you are a support contractor, like at a MetroStar or somewhere else, and you're close to the mission that you're really passionate about, over time, like that's how, building up that network, so many different opportunities if you truly want to be a government civilian inside of this space. But as someone that was also a defense contractor supporting, the mission for 3 years on that side of the fence, it's very rewarding just being on that side. And like Hannah can attest to it. Like she said the same kind of, we did the reverse roles of civilian to contractor, but it's super beneficial and like rewarding just being connected to the mission, regardless if you're a federal civilian or a defense contractor. So, I mean, I'm no expert in navigating the hiring process, but I would definitely start with DCWF. I think it's a really cool thing. It's actually a pretty great kind of like interactive map, just so you can kind of see, and it's a good way to kind of just, hey, what is out there? What is the DoD looking for? And, and then, find ways to connect. LinkedIn's a great opportunity. All these great conferences and things like that are a great opportunity. Go to the ones that are passionate to you, and you never know what happens.
Yeah. And Austin, similar question, like you mentioned earlier about like even before coming to an Army software factory, people can have their hands in affecting, software modernization and develop it within their own little sphere of capabilities in their uniformed role. What would you say to that soldier or airman that's sitting in a more operational unit but wanting to make change, and they see these blaring problems with either the process or the software that they're using? How can they make change even in their current role?
Yeah, it's a really good question. 2 answers. The first is just do it. Like just make a thing. Like there's, the set of tools is somewhat limited. Yeah. But there are tools like, Access, SharePoint, even Outlook that do support at least some level of automation. Those you have sort of immediately available to you. I know people that have like stood up their own like Heroku servers and like run, custom code on like a Raspberry Pi or something to like at least introduce some kind of automation. That would be my first recommendation, is like explore the space, like just figure out what you can do, because not only are you developing your technical chops, at the same time, you're also getting a good understanding of what the constraints are in like the Army or, whatever branch of service, whatever the digital ecosystem is. And the second thing I would say is actually the same advice I would give to anybody seeking any kind of sort of computer related job is like, just do hobby projects. Like you might not be able in your current environment to solve the problem, but you can certainly envision how you might solve that problem in general. And that'll get you just as spun up on what it means to do development, what it means to make a good, solution for a particular kind of thing. And it doesn't even have to be operational, right? Some of my best experience that I've had is like video game related. It doesn't have to be specific, as long as you're like, all right, I understand that there are problems that I can solve in this kind of way. How do I go about it? Like, what do I do? That gives you far more experience than, while it is also valuable to do courses and understand and like licenses and stuff like that, just building a thing will get you so much further ahead. And like I said, before, a lot of the folks at the software factory had done that exact thing. They had seen a problem, they had built something to fix it, or they had built something that could have fixed it if it were able to be deployed. And both of those were really valuable approaches, because that just puts you so far ahead in terms of really understanding technology spaces.
I've been a technical recruiter for more than 15 years, and whenever I'm on an initial call with somebody and they use the words home lab, I'm like, oh, tell me more. Tell me what you did, because that to me like you can be an associate software engineer at the Army Software Factory or, anywhere, and you got a lot of support around you. So it's more about what we're doing, and that's good. We need to know you can work as a team, but tell me what you did in your basement, like, what weird nerdy things you can do, like, no offense, but that is the initiative that, a lot of good technical recruiter is looking for. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Don't let your position or your lack of a position in a software factory limit you from doing things. So on that same topic, like a lot of transitioning veterans, in the technical space, in the IT modernization space, that want to pursue their career post uniform service in industry, they ask a lot of questions around like, okay, there's all these certs out there, there's all these learning paths, like what do I need to do? Like what would you all say to that person that is preparing to transition and just wants to know like what learning path or certifications they should get?
Yeah, and like certifications, everybody has their own opinion of those things. Like, I think it depends on what career field you're trying to get into. If you're trying to become a cybersecurity, I think like Security Plus is obviously like a baseline type of certification. If you're trying to become more on the cloud engineering, like, one of the architecture, like AWS architect or whatever the equivalent is for Azure, those types of things are going to help you just get up to speed. But I would echo what Austin is saying is you just get comfortable experimenting and learning and troubleshooting and trying and figuring out what tools you have opinions on that help you become like a better developer or better X, and then just fall in love with those processes and tools. Like if you want to be a designer, fall in love with like building out wireframes, building out like different prototypes, figuring, getting feedback from people, and then editing and adjusting those types of things. You gotta like, I think if you have like an opinion of where you want to be, like if you want to be a portfolio manager, then go deep into product management, because then you can lead a product, be successful there, understand what it takes to like break down work and all of those pieces. And then you'll grow into, the portfolio management or whatever you're trying to get at as an aspirational goal. And I think it's just defining what that is and really being ruthless and energetic about it, because there's so much data out there, either through different fields or whatever. There's so much opportunity to learn, type of thing.
Yeah. Hannah, anything else?
Yeah, I'm like not a bias for certs. I'm just like a continuous like learning person. So I'm always trying to learn more and gain information, but I don't frankly have time to do certifications, so it's not great. But like I just process information and I learn and I get curious. So it's like if someone doesn't have certs, I don't like write them off at all, because like they could just be really interested in the topic and want to do versus like take a quiz. Though to Matt's point, you do need certain things to get privileged access into environments, and I get that, and that's a check the box type thing, but certs don't mean much to me.
Yeah, and I'm glad y'all mentioned that, because I think a lot of transitioning veterans, they get hung up on like, oh, I've got to get this CompTIA certification, which are all good, but it's what I continually am hearing from you all is just do something, like for instance, right now, I'm going through the Microsoft Copilot training courses, and just because that's like what our organization uses, and I've got a seat, and it's amazing the capabilities it allows me to do. And as a technical recruiter, I'm going through these things. I'm like, oh man, I could apply this in this repeatable task that I have, So, that's one. I think, one thing that technical recruiters are communicating to candidates these days, and this can go true if you're a transitioning military veteran, is like learn AI. Like whether you're a software engineer or you're a logistics personnel or you're a recruiter, whatever your industry is, like everyone is incorporating AI. So learn AI, learn how you do that, how you incorporate it into your daily tasks, and more than just daily tasks. Like how can it make you better, So, and there's tons of free resources out there for people to do. But if you're not learning AI, you need to.
I do have one more thing to plug. A
Yes.
particularly effective way to get involved is contribute to open source projects. And that is also a way to get involved with like the DoD space in general. Like open source cybersecurity related things will teach you everything about everything that there is to know, and are an incredible thing to have on a resume. And finally, what Hannah said about certifications, totally agree. If you are effective and it will be a good idea to bring you on the team, the company will help you get those certifications.
Yep.
They're not necessarily a precondition to
Yep.
hiring.
Absolutely. There's some circuit.
I just went to MIT, so, that'll lie a loss there.
Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I will leave the floor open. If there's something that you all wanted to communicate to our audience, feel free to do so now. If anybody has anything else that they wanted to say.
I just want to humble brag on Matt a bit. So Matt's one of the best leaders I think I've ever worked with. He is really focused on upskilling and supporting those around him and driving value across whatever it's technology, people, process. So if you're an airman and you're trying to think about where you want to go and figure out your next assignment out of tech school, definitely see if you can get to BESPIN, because Matt's a great leader and a great person.
Well, there you go.
Ditto. Thank you for that kind words. But yeah, one of my passions is always trying to get people to, level up. What is their next thing that they can do? Don't be afraid to try new things. And I mean, that's basically what this conversation was about. So thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. Austin, any final words?
I mean, I'd echo the same thing that Hannah said, but for Hannah. I work at MetroStar because Hannah is at MetroStar, and we've got a lot of folks from Army Software Factory here. But, it very much true of all those branches of service. The people that you get in contact with and the people that you work with, you'll sort of maintain that forever. So if you're interested in the tech space, just start talking to people, and you'll get pulled in. You'll find your way into the rooms and into the circles where we're really moving the needle forward on stuff, and it's exciting. So.
Yeah, and if you're a transitioning veteran, networking, and I know that, you hear it from everybody that it's the most important thing to do, but I'm not beating a dead horse when I say it is absolutely true. So making these connections, we'll have Matt, Hannah, and Austin and myself contact information in the description of this podcast, at least LinkedIn profiles. So go blow up Matt's LinkedIn profile with a bunch of DMs. That would be great. But if you do want information, reach out and talk to people, tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, I saw you on this podcast, or so-and-so told me about you, or I just saw your LinkedIn page. You've got a lot of experience that I'm looking to get into. Can I have 15 minutes of a lunch break? There's plenty of people out there, not everybody, but there's plenty of people out there that are willing to do that because you're a veteran. And that's not using your uniform or your veteran status loosely. It is a path to a conversation. So utilize it. Don't be ashamed of it. That's why this podcast exists, is to help you. So there's plenty of people out there that are supportive. Just ask the questions, reach out, network, who is an important thing. So definitely do that. We'll appreciate everybody's time. If you are watching us, listening to us, we do appreciate you giving us the hour or so of time. And thanks, Matt, for joining in, as well as Hannah and Austin. This is Civvies, and I hope you enjoy the time.